To understand the weight of the moment in Ivory Coast, one must look back. The upcoming 2025 presidential election is not just another political contest. It is a referendum on the nation's fragile peace, a test of its democratic soul. 15 years ago, the country was torn apart. The year was 2010, and a disputed presidential election plunged the nation into one of its darkest chapters. The incumbent, Laurent Gbagbo, refused to concede defeat. His challenger, Alassane Ouattara, declared himself the rightful winner, backed by international observers. What followed was a catastrophic standoff that split the nation, its military, and its people right down the middle. The world watched as a political dispute escalated into a brutal civil war. For 5 long and agonizing months, Ivory Coast bled. The economic capital, Abidjan, once a symbol of West African prosperity, became a battlefield. The sound of gunfire and shelling replaced the city's usual vibrant hum. In the west, ethnic tensions, long simmering beneath the surface, exploded into mass violence. Neighbors turned against neighbors. Families were ripped apart by allegiance and fear. The conflict was not just about 2 men vying for power. It became a struggle for the very identity of the nation, a brutal fight over who belonged and who had the right to lead. The human cost was staggering and deeply personal. International organizations estimate that more than 3,000 people lost their lives in the violence. Hundreds of thousands were forced to flee their homes, becoming refugees in neighboring countries or internally displaced within their own land. The stories from that time are harrowing. They speak of summary executions, enforced disappearances, and widespread sexual violence used as a weapon of war. These were not abstract statistics. They were mothers, fathers, sons and daughters caught in the crossfire of political ambition. The crisis left an indelible scar on the national psyche, a collective trauma that haunts the country to this day. The standoff finally ended in April 2011. With the support of French and United Nations forces, fighters loyal to Alassane Ouattara stormed the presidential residence and arrested Laurent Gbagbo. The image of a defiant Gbagbo being captured in his bunker was broadcast around the world, signaling the end of the conflict. Ouattara was sworn in as president, and a new chapter began. But the end of the fighting was not the end of the story. The ghost of 2010 still lingers, its shadow stretching over the political landscape. Every election since has been viewed through the lens of that crisis, a constant and chilling reminder of how quickly political division can descend into all-out war. The physical destruction from the Second Ivorian Civil War was immense, but the invisible wounds were far deeper. The conflict left behind a legacy of bitterness and mistrust that has proven difficult to heal. Political affiliations became deeply entrenched, often aligning with ethnic and regional identities. Supporters of Laurent Gbagbo, primarily from the south and west, felt disenfranchised and targeted by the new administration. Many viewed Gbagbo's arrest and subsequent trial at the International Criminal Court as a form of victor's justice, not a genuine effort at reconciliation. This sentiment created a profound sense of grievance that has festered for over a decade, shaping political discourse and fueling opposition. On the other side, those who supported Alassane Ouattara, largely from the north, remember the violence as a necessary struggle to uphold the democratic will of the people. They saw Gbagbo's refusal to step down as an attack on the rule of law itself. For them, the Ouattara years brought a return to order and a chance to rebuild a shattered nation. However, this narrative often clashed with the experiences of those who suffered at the hands of pro-Ouattara forces. Reports from human rights groups documented atrocities committed by both sides, yet accountability has been perceived as one-sided. This imbalance in justice has prevented true national healing and kept the wounds of the past wide open. The scars are also etched into the very fabric of Ivorian society. the war destroyed social cohesion, creating divisions within communities that had once lived peacefully side by side. Trust, the essential glue of any society, was shattered. People became wary of their neighbors, of the government, and of the political process itself. The promise of democracy, which had inspired so much hope in the 1990s, was now associated with violence and turmoil. For many ordinary Ivorians, the word election no longer evokes a sense of civic duty or opportunity, but a feeling of anxiety and a foreboding sense of déjà vu. This deep-seated fear is a powerful silent actor in the country's political drama. This legacy of division and trauma is the backdrop against which the 2025 election will unfold. The key political figures are, in many ways, ghosts from the same conflict. Alassane Ouattara is seeking a controversial fourth term. Laurent Gbagbo, though barred from running, remains a powerful force in opposition politics. Guillaume Soro, a former rebel leader who helped bring Ouattara to power, is now a fierce opponent in exile. Their long and complicated history is the nation's history. The political battles of today are continuations of the battles of yesterday, fought by the same protagonists. This makes the stakes incredibly high, as it is not just an election, but the potential reopening of old wounds. In the aftermath of the war, what happened next surprised many observers. Under President Ouattara's leadership, Ivory Coast embarked on a period of stunning economic recovery. With stability restored, investment flowed back into the country. The government launched ambitious infrastructure projects, transforming the nation's landscape. New highways, bridges, and hospitals were built at a remarkable pace. The skyline of Abidjan, scarred by the conflict, was soon filled with cranes, a testament to the city's rebirth. This period of growth, often dubbed the Ivorian miracle, turned the country into a beacon of economic hope on the continent. The numbers tell a story of remarkable progress. Between 2012 and 2019, Ivory Coast's economy grew at an average rate of over 8% per year, making it one of the fastest-growing economies in Africa and the world. Schools that had been closed during the conflict reopened their doors. The country reclaimed its position as the world's top cocoa producer, and its ports once again bustled with activity. For many, this newfound prosperity was proof that the country had turned a corner. The narrative was one of resilience, of a nation pulling itself up from the ashes of war and building a brighter future. Ivory Coast became a model for post-conflict recovery. Ivory Coast became a model for post-conflict recovery. Yet, this prosperity did not reach everyone equally, and it failed to heal the deep political divides. The economic boom was concentrated in Abidjan and other major cities, while many rural areas felt left behind. Critics argued that the growth was not inclusive, widening the gap between the rich and the poor. More importantly, the focus on economic development seemed to come at the expense of political reconciliation and democratic reform. The government's opponents accused it of prioritizing concrete and steel over justice and dialogue. The fundamental questions of identity and political exclusion that had fueled the 2010 crisis remained largely unanswered. This created a paradox at the heart of modern Ivory Coast. On the surface, the nation was a success story, peaceful, stable, and prosperous. But underneath, the foundations of this peace felt fragile. The political grievances of the past continued to simmer, kept in check by a strong state and the promise of economic opportunity, but never truly resolved. Many Ivorians began to ask a troubling question. Has stability been achieved at the cost of genuine democracy? This question has grown louder over the years, and it now stands at the center of the debate surrounding the 2025 election. The nation stands at a crossroads, torn between the appeal of continued stability and the yearning for democratic change. With Laurent Gbagbo's dramatic capture in April 2011, the immediate conflict came to an end, and Alassane Ouattara's presidency officially began. The task ahead was monumental. He inherited a country in ruins, its economy shattered, its people deeply divided, and its institutions hollowed out by years of political crisis and war. The international community, which had backed his claim to the presidency, rallied to his side, offering financial aid and technical support. Ouattara, a former high-ranking official at the International Monetary Fund, was seen as a technocrat with the skills and global connections needed to steer the nation back from the brink. His immediate priority was to restore security and re-establish the authority of the state across the entire territory. The first months of his rule were focused on stabilization. A new national army, the Forces Républicaines de Côte d'Ivoire, composed largely of the former rebel forces that had supported Ouattara, was tasked with securing the country. Ouattara promised a new beginning for all Ivorians, vowing to govern for the entire nation, not just for those who had voted for him. This promise of unity was a powerful message for a country desperate to leave the trauma of war behind. However, the dawn of this new era was cast in the long shadow of the recent conflict. The administration gambled that rapid development and tangible improvements in people's daily lives could bridge the political divides that had torn the country apart. The message was simple and persuasive. A return to prosperity would be the ultimate peace dividend, a shared goal that could unite a fractured nation where political dialogue had failed. Parallel to the massive infrastructure drive, Ivory Coast's economy experienced a renaissance that, honestly, captivated international observers. With political stability assured and a business-friendly government at the helm, foreign investors who had fled the country began to return. President Ouattara, leveraging his international finance background, successfully courted multilateral institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, securing loans and debt relief that provided the fiscal space for his ambitious development agenda. The country's investment code was reformed to attract private capital, and the results were immediate and dramatic. Ivory Coast quickly became one of the most attractive investment destinations in sub-Saharan Africa. The economic growth figures were nothing short of spectacular. From 2012 to 2019, the country's gross domestic product expanded at an average annual rate of over 8%. This sustained boom lifted Ivory Coast into the ranks of the world's fastest-growing economies. The agricultural sector, the traditional backbone of the economy, was revitalized. As the world's leading producer of cocoa, the country benefited from government reforms aimed at improving yields and ensuring better prices for farmers. The services sector, particularly banking, telecommunications and retail, also exploded, driven by a resurgent consumer class in Abidjan and other major cities. The narrative of an Ivorian miracle took hold, both at home and abroad. This economic dynamism transformed the social landscape. A new sense of optimism spread through parts of the population as jobs were created and opportunities expanded. A growing middle class emerged, eager to enjoy the fruits of peace and prosperity. Shopping malls, modern restaurants, and international brands began to proliferate in Abidjan, catering to this new consumer base. The city's vibrant cultural scene was reborn, with art galleries, music festivals, and a thriving nightlife that reclaimed its status as a regional hub. For a generation of young Ivorians who had grown up amidst crisis, this era of growth offered the first real hope of a stable and prosperous future within their own country. The economic success became the cornerstone of President Ouattara's political legitimacy. It validated his leadership and provided a powerful argument for his continued rule. The government's message was clear. Stability under Ouattara had delivered prosperity. The economic miracle was not just a statistic, it was a powerful tool for consolidating power and building a consensus around a vision of development-first governance. The presidential race of 2025 was more than a political event. It was a referendum on leadership, on democracy itself, and on how far the nation had come since its turbulent past. Under the Ivorian system, a candidate must secure more than half of all votes to claim victory. Otherwise, the top two go head-to-head in a runoff. But this year, it wouldn't come to that. The race began with familiar names. Incumbent President Alassane Ouattara, representing the rally of Houphouetists for democracy and peace, announced his candidacy in July. His challengers, Jean-Louis Billon, Simone Gbagbo, and a handful of independents, hoped to capture the nation's desire for change. It held hearings and collected testimonies, but its final report and recommendations were largely ignored by the government. But the campaign soon turned controversial. Several major opposition figures, including former President Laurent Gbagbo and financier Tidjane Thiam, were disqualified. As the campaign heated up, the government moved to ban public protests against the exclusions. Supporters of the opposition cried foul, calling it a democracy under strain. Meanwhile, the streets of Abidjan filled with uncertainty and silence. Candidates spoke of change, jobs, and reform. Some even proposed bold economic shifts, including a controversial idea to abandon the CFA franc. But for most Ivorians, daily life mattered more than policy. Stability, peace, and a fair chance at the future. On October 25th, Ivorians went to the polls. Turnout was just above 50%, a quiet sign of both hope and hesitation. President Ouattara secured 91% of the vote. His victory speech emphasized unity and progress. But beneath the numbers, critics saw a deeper story, one of exclusion and unanswered questions. For the ruling party, the win confirmed continuity. For others, it reflected the narrowing of democratic space. Was this overwhelming victory a show of national confidence, or the result of an uneven playing field? The debate, once again, divided the nation. Beyond politics, life in Ivory Coast moves on. The people, resilient, ambitious, and proud, continue to hope for a future of fairness, opportunity, and peace. But as 2025 closes, one question lingers. Can democracy truly thrive when some voices are silenced? Well, we look forward to knowing your thoughts about this matter. Comment your answer in the comment section. We will be glad to have your perspective. Africa's stories deserve to be told, clearly, truthfully, and powerfully. If you believe in informed voices and real storytelling, don't just watch, be part of it. Hit subscribe, like, and share this video to keep Africa's truth alive.